Welcome to Subconscious Conversations, where we take a look into the intricate world of the subconscious mind and how to heal the body, mind, heart, and spirit through its wisdom and guidance. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Brielle, and I'm the soul practitioner at Springseed Wellness, where I practice the energy medicine techniques of Soul Survey, which I created myself, and Emotion Code, Body Code, and Belief Code, which were created by Dr. Bradley Nelson, as well as Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique, which was created by Dolores Cannon. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about spirit work. And no, I don't mean trying to heal someone or myself with the assistance of spirits. The type of spirit work I'm talking about is working on spirits to help them cross over. This is really the first time I'm talking about this openly with anyone aside from close family, so I'm feeling pretty vulnerable with this episode because I don't want anybody to think I'm crazy. But it really and truly is part of who I am, and I've finally come to terms with the fact that it's part of my purpose and destiny in this life. So I'm going to unabashedly be authentically me and trust that it will be okay. And this has been kind of a lifelong journey for me to get to the point where I'm open to doing this kind of work, let alone talking about it. But it's also been something that I've tried very hard to ignore throughout my life as well. And I think there's probably a strong inherited component to it as well. I always knew my grandma and other relatives had a gift for communicating with the other side. But my grandma was extremely secretive about that sort of stuff as well. And she was very careful to not let us kids be exposed to it. But when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I'm guessing, maybe younger, but in any case, my cousin, who was around the same age as me, passed away from a genetic illness. And I hadn't spent a whole lot of time with him as a child, but I had spent some time with him, and I remember I always really liked him. And I remember thinking he was just the sweetest kid, and I always felt so bad for him because his illness prevented him from being able to run around and play with the rest of us kids. And I really did care about him. And after his death, I was so sad for him, and I was scared that he was lost and scared. And I actually told my mom that I wanted to die too so that he wouldn't have to be alone. And she was really sweet, and she comforted me and calmed me down. And very soon after that, a family member who was very gifted at remote writing had received a message that my cousin was with our great grandmother and that he was safe and was at peace. And even as careful as my grandmother was to keep us away from that sort of stuff, I remember hearing about that message, and I'm glad I did because it allowed me to be at peace as well and to stop feeling like I had to die so that he wasn't alone. Now, granted, part of that was probably just a young child trying to come to grips with the existence of death at such a young age. But I had this extremely strong desire, even at that young of an age, to make sure that those who pass away are not scared and alone. And I always had this very strong feeling throughout my life, like a big part of my purpose in life was to help spirits cross over. But as I mentioned in the last episode, I've always been inexplicably terrified of spirits. So I tried my best to completely ignore it and pretend like spirits didn't even really exist. And I would get so scared at the slightest sign of spirits or discussion about spirits. But there have also been some pretty undeniable experiences in my life as well in regards to spirits, but they always terrified me. But when I was first getting into energy healing is when I first heard someone mention anything about spirits also needing energy healing sometimes. And it was almost like I heard Destiny whispering in my ear, "Here we go." But I was like, I don't want to do that. I don't feel safe doing that, and I'm not going to do it. But Destiny had other plans in mind, I guess. And as I mentioned in the last episode, also, I was coming across a lot of entity attachments in myself and in others, and I realized very quickly that I couldn't treat them all the same. Now, if it's a dark entity, I very sternly get rid of it permanently. And everyone has different tactics of how to do this, and I'm not going to get detailed about my method or anything, but I very sternly and permanently get rid of them. But with disembodied spirits, those who were living and have passed away, I want to take a much more gentle and compassionate approach. So when I find these, I approach them with compassion and I ask if there's any specific message they need to give or if there's anything they need to resolve before they cross over. And sometimes there is. Now, if I'm working on myself, I just help that spirit right away and then continue to work on myself afterwards. But if this were to happen during a client's session, I would just work on that spirit separately after my client's session, of course. But there was one instance where I had been working on an elderly dog who was near the end of her life, sadly. And I was really hoping that I was helping her heal and live a longer life, but really I kind of knew I was actually helping her ease into the transition towards leaving the physical world and entering the spirit world. And that's really sad, but if I can help someone who's coming to the end of their lives in any way feel better about it, I'm so happy to do so. And when she passed away, I was notified within minutes, and I felt this very strong urge to see if she needed anything else from me before she completed her journey. So I tuned into her spirit and was able to clear up another few things for her, and then I asked her if she wanted to cross over on her own or if she wanted me to help her cross over. And she wanted me to help her cross over. So I guided her to the light and helped her cross over. And when I did, I felt what I can only describe as a little spark of heaven. It was the most beautiful thing I have ever felt. It brought me to tears then, and just about every time I think about it, I still choke up. It was just the most beautiful thing in existence. And even though I only felt a tiny little spark of it, it totally changed my life. It changed my understanding of everything. And I actually think that that sweet little dog was actually guiding me to that experience way more than I was guiding her to the light. And also, I have to say that I had absolutely no idea what I was doing trying to help her cross over or even how to do that. Helping someone cross over was never anything that was ever part of any of my trainings or certifications. It was just something I felt very compelled to do for this sweet little dog. And I think the fact that it was a dog made me feel a lot more comfortable to try and help. But that experience definitely changed my perspective, and feeling a little more comfortable after that experience and realizing the importance of helping spirits find their way to the light, I became less terrified of the process. And I practiced a little bit more spirit work after that, trying to just help them clear out whatever baggage they needed to help them on the other side. But still, I was very apprehensive about it, and I didn't do it very often. My fear was that if I opened myself up to that kind of work, I would be opening myself up even more to negative entities attaching to me or some other nefarious things. But again, I guess destiny had another plan. And over time, I noticed more and more signs were starting to come through. And for instance, I would notice that my dog would be particularly edgy for a few days, and heck, everyone in the household would be a little edgy for a few days. And then I would either run into a spirit attachment or I would find out that there was a spirit hanging around the house or the property. And now I want to clarify that for a second as well. I will find an entity or spirit attachment just within the normal flow of a body code session. But when there's just a spirit hanging around and not actually attached to someone, I notice that in different ways. You know, like I said, with people being edgy, particularly the dog. But one of the most clear, undeniable signs that a spirit is around is when my polarity all of a sudden shifts. And by that I mean when I muscle test, I get the opposite result as I normally would. So the fact that I use a dowsing bobber for my muscle testing, it usually bobs up and down for yes and side to side for no. And I always test my yes and no before I do any other muscle testing. But in these cases, I get side to side for yes and up and down for no. So as soon as I get a no response when I'm saying yes, it almost always means there's a spirit about. For me anyway, I'm sure there are a lot of times when other people experience polarity shifts that have nothing to do with spirits, but for me, that's just one of the main ways that they get my attention. So when that would happen, I would kind of hesitantly agree to help them, but I was still pretty scared of the whole process. But eventually I learned how to ensure my safety while I do this kind of work, and eventually I started getting different, even stronger signs, like I will sometimes actually hear the spirits saying things to me. It sounds crazy, I know, but I actually hear their words in my head. Don't lock me up. It might be a little too sad or scary to get into too many details, so I won't talk about much. But I have helped a few spirits who were still struggling with the pain they endured in life and really needed to clear it up in order to cross over. So, yeah, it was scary at first, but I found that I can do it very safely, and it feels so good to be able to help in that way. And I think it bears mentioning that I live right next to a cemetery as well, so that probably increases my exposure to this kind of work a little bit. In fact, one night I got up in the middle of the night for a drink of water and to use the restroom. And I actually heard this voice in my head saying that they were lost and wanted to go home but couldn't find the way. And I was half asleep, so I didn't really think that much of it. But the next day, I saw a funeral across the way at the cemetery, and I realized the home that they couldn't find their way back to was the light, or heaven, or source, or whatever you choose to call it. And I realized I needed to help that person cross over. So I did, and it felt really good to have helped. And whether they realize it or not, I'm pretty sure the neighbors also appreciate that there are fewer lost souls wandering around our neighborhood. Now, there was also another time that my polarity shifted, so I started helping this spirit, and I was suddenly getting this very strong impression that it was a young child that hadn't actually passed away yet, but was in the hospital fighting for their life. So I asked some questions and got confirmation on that. And then I was kind of in a quandary of ethics because it's unethical to work on a child without their parents' permission, and it's unethical to work on someone without their consent. Now, obviously, I had their spirit's consent because it came to me looking for help. And with spirits, I don't need any other level of consent because that's irrelevant at that point. So I was working on the spirit with no problem, but when I found out that it was a still living child, I had this moment of feeling like I had broken some ethical rules. But I just trusted that if their spirit came to me for help, it was okay to help them. And I certainly wasn't going to stop in the middle of helping someone. I don't know really how real and true that experience was. It was real for me. I don't know if I helped that child heal and recover. Obviously, I feel like it was real and true, and I hope I helped that child. But the fascinating learning experience with that situation was the realization that sometimes a living person's spirit will sort of wander and seek help even when the body is incapable, sort of like an out of body experience or something. And again, I feel very vulnerable talking openly about this because I know some people are going to think I'm absolutely crazy. Heck, sometimes I think I'm absolutely crazy, but that doesn't mean it's not real. Now, one thing I have had a difficult time wrapping my head around is I've heard so oftentimes that there is so much miraculous divine healing for a soul on the other side. And I was thinking, well, if there's all this wonderful healing for the soul on the other side, then why do some spirits need help from a living person? And why do we carry past life trauma with us? And I have no idea if I'm right or if I'm wrong or what, but some thoughts I have on the subject are I think there are certain human pains that only humans can heal. So sometimes the divine beings on the other side might not be able to heal certain things because they lack that human experience of it. And I think a soul has to go into the light before they're able to receive that divine healing. And sometimes they can't find their way through their own darkness to get there. Sometimes the darkness of a person's life is so intense that they don't even realize they can find their way to the light where they are capable of receiving that healing. So, if there's anything I can do to help the souls find their way and to find healing, I'm so happy for that. And having felt that tiny little spark of heaven that one time, if I can bring a soul out of a place of darkness, fear, or confusion and help them find that place with that immensely wonderful, loving feeling, my gosh, that is just so fulfilling. And I guess I'm just that weird that I want to help everyone heal themselves, whether they're alive or not. But that's a weird badge I'm trying to wear proudly instead of shamefully. And when I help spirits find peace and crossover, I feel like I'm also helping the living as well because the fewer lost souls we have wandering around, the better the energy is everywhere and everyone and everything benefits. So I think it's a very worthy cause. However, as I mentioned earlier, it is a cause I tried to run away from for a very long time also. But it just started happening slowly and naturally enough that I was finally sort of getting on board with it. When I had my quantum healing hypnosis technique session and the practitioner was asking my subconscious questions, of course, one of the questions I had her ask was, "What's my purpose?" And sure enough, part of my purpose is to help souls heal whatever they need to in order to cross over. And part of my purpose is to help as many living people as possible heal their wounds. And part of my purpose is to help heal the land. But I have no idea how to do that one yet, but I'm sure I'll figure it out. But the fascinating thing is, I also got very similar information through the soul survey session I did on myself, Although that was a bit more cryptic, it was essentially the same information. So it's really exciting to finally be starting to live my purpose and realize my destiny. Even though the journey has been a little uncomfortable and scary at times, it's also been a very wonderful growing experience, and I'm really excited to see where life takes me next. Hopefully, not to the psych ward for talking publicly about metaphysical topics, but hey, Halloween is the season when many cultures believe the veil is its thinnest between the physical world and the spirit world, and the connection between the two is at its strongest. So, seems like a fitting time to discuss this topic. And I hope it was at least entertaining and thought provoking for you. And please keep in mind that even though I do have this kind of unusual side to me, it doesn't make me a weirdo that you need to start avoiding. My only desire is to help others. I just don't discriminate as much as I used to about who I help. So if I didn't completely scare you away with my October and Halloween episodes, please be sure to join me for next episode where I will be talking about veterans, because it'll be about a week away from Veterans Day at that point. So, see you then. If you would like to set up a session with me to experience this work for yourself, please go to springseedwellness.com. If you would like to find a practitioner in your local area, please go to discoverhealing.com. And please always feel free to reach out with any questions or specific topics you would like me to address. See you next episode.